Hello, everyone. Hi out there. Hello, Bristol. We see you've already checked in the chat room. Nice to have you with us. Welcome to the musical QuaranStream with Glenn and Bree. I am Glenn.
And I'm Bree.
And the musical QuaranStream is where we chat about musical theater for a couple of times a week. Ever since the whole shelter in home for COVID began.
If this is your first time, we talk about musical theater and stuff that's going on that we've seen kind of during the quarantine. And we sometimes pitch some shows.
Yeah.
We started off as kind of a celebration of musical theater, remembering shows that we have done and imagining the shows we could see getting out of quarantine. And now we kind of just talk about musical theater and pitches and shows that we have seen that theaters have done and, celebration of kind of the arts in quarantine. And we're happy to have you with us. We understand that Twitch is not really a musical theater space, but we're occupying a small little bit of it.
Twitch keeps expanding. That's the thing. And this is we are not sponsored by Twitch, except that we are on their platform. So that technically that's a form of sponsorship. But Twitch began as just video gaming. And then it turned into video gaming and art, because they did a whole event where they live streamed Bob Ross, and there is still a Bob Ross stream that you can tune into on Twitch 24 hours a day. You can sit and watch the joy of painting. And since then, they've added things. We're typically in the podcast and talk shows category when we do the musical QuaranStream.
Yes, we very rarely sing because that means we have to pay some royalties. So.
Yes.
Maybe if we get a little bit bigger.
Yes. If you send everybody to our Ko-Fi or to my Patreon, eventually we'll be able to present whole musicals on the musical QuaranStream. Won't that be fun? Tell everyone! All right. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about, what we've seen. So right before the stream, we watched the new Howard Ashman documentary on Disney+.
Very good.
Yes,
especially
very good.
relevant to musical theater.
Yes. And we were talking about how the world has kind of, even before pandemic, the world had kind of changed for what young artists are able to do to sort of carve out their own space in the world.
Well, we're older millennials, and we mentioned that quite a bit because we're getting to be kind of like that middle-aged demographic here. But we talk a lot about how a lot of our mentorship and leadership in the arts were kind of coming up in the 60s and 70s, which was a really different experience. Even in the 90s, which we were kind of going to school and entering that that working world as is very, very different. And I think the one thing that kind of both hit us about Howard Ashman's life is I think him and his friends just decided to start a theater and rent a space and build a 99-seat theater. And we were even thinking I lived in New York right after 9/11, and I said, that just wasn't a possibility. There was not a theater space or a loft space or an industrial space that you could just take over and pay for, actually, especially coming out of he came out of a master's program. And we were both just that was just 40, 50 years ago, and only 30 years based on when we would be doing it. And that really changed a lot. And I think a lot of our education that we were getting was kind of that attitude of if you don't get hired by places, just create your own space. And I think that economically that was really impossible for a lot of folks in our generation. And that led to a lot of different issues that we had to kind of overcome. And in fact, when I talked to my mom about why I'm kind of working where I'm working and having the type of job that I have and the money that I have, she's like, oh, wait, why did you have a hard time when you graduated from college? What happened? Oh, yeah, 9/11. And then she's like, and then why did you have a hard time after you got your master's? Oh, yeah, the economic recession in 2008. So there was always kind of something, I'm not trying to say oh, I'm a victim of circumstance or anything, but there was a really different experience that we lived through as artists and creative people that, I don't think a lot of our mentors, teachers, and parents lived through in the 60s and 70s. Even though there was similar economic recession in the 70s, there always seemed to be a place for artists to kind of build up more impoverished areas to start increasing the art and the culture and the economics of the area. And that's become a lot harder, I think, in recent years.
Yeah, and it is, it's not just the economic issues that are a broader spectrum across the economy, like you said. The 9/11 attack, the 2008 crash, all of these things really have an impact on the economy as a whole. But since the 70s, the New York real estate market has changed an awful lot. The regulations around off and off Broadway theaters have changed a lot. So that even if, see, when they were starting their show, when they were starting their theater, they could basically say, we're starting in a theater that's basically beginning life as a hole in the wall in this rough neighborhood of New York. And everybody thinks we're crazy because nobody will actually want to come down to this area of New York in the middle of the night to see a show. But we're going to start it, and we're going to do this all ourselves and everything. Even if you could find a spot like that now, that you could afford as a small group in New York, that wasn't already being bought up by another real estate investor betting on this being the next Village or whatever. There's still more regulations and things now regarding the environment that a theater has to have, the positions that a theater has to hire. And a lot of these regulations are good regulations, don't get me wrong. They're regulations that keep people employed, keep people treated fairly, and keep people safe. But they make it harder for you to say, I'm just going to start up and do my own thing.
Well, I think that this is why I feel in particular that theater is going to kind of continue after the quarantine and the pandemic is, that's why people developed site-specific theaters. And that's why people, kind of try to make other opportunities available to them. But it is definitely more challenging than I think it was in, I think they said 1971 is when they formed the WPA theater.
Yeah. But the Howard Ashman documentary is fantastic. Learn a lot about Howard Ashman in it, and you get to see Angela Lansbury during the filming of Beauty and the Beast, recording some of her vocals and weighing in about, well, and here is the thing that I think you should be animating for Mrs. Potts during this point. So it's a lot of fun, and you get to see a lot of good things, a lot of very important things as well. In terms of the life of Howard Ashman.
Well, what I think is kind of the most important relevant thing to our QuaranStream is it really expresses in no uncertain terms what Howard Ashman believed made a piece of musical theater.
Yeah.
How he really chose to live within certain bounds of musical storytelling, and how that really revolutionized really what a musical is for Disney, animated Disney movies today, and really seeing kind of that impact and kind of just... I'm sure that there are other directors and other songwriters and book writers that would think it completely different, but it was just very, very interesting to kind of hear his reasoning and background in the creation of storytelling and the creation of music and storytelling. So I think that if you are a musical theater person and you are watching our stream, after we're done, go check out Howard on Disney Plus. If you have Disney Plus. Yeah. If not, go get a little 7-day free trial. Yeah. And go check it out, because I think that if you're interested in musical theater and you're interested in writing musical theater, I think it's definitely something worth looking at. Yeah,
because it does follow his entire career through musical theater, moving into film, both the triumphs and the tribulations sort of thing. So it's a very good story with a lot of good information for young artists in it. I love that. I don't want to spoil too much about it. On the other hand, it's a documentary. It's all factual information. How do you spoil a documentary? But one of my favorite moments is they talk to one of the artists who was working at Disney at the time that Howard Ashman came in to start working on their films. And they're talking about he's giving them a workshop in how to tell musical stories. And they said it was just wild. We're sitting there and we're like, did he just say your main character needs a want? What does that even mean, to need a want? and of course it's a very valid part of storytelling and
musical theater.
Yeah, your main character has to want something, so they need a want. And I think that's very valuable creatively. Let's see, anything else you want to talk about?
I mean, honestly, like this, I always find it harder on Saturdays because, you know, I'm working full time, so I don't really do kind of a lot of artistic searching.
We tend to binge watch the things we're going to talk about the next week on Saturday after the stream, and then Sunday, and
yeah. Basically, I think kind of where we are is. I just want to encourage everybody. I've heard from a lot of folks really saying that they have not seen a lot of coronavirus impact their own life, and I just want everybody to keep kind of treating it very seriously.
Yes.
I really do feel like we're going to be here for like the remainder of this year, kind of in quarantine, and it's a bit of a bummer, and I feel like the more we can kind of keep ourselves safe and mitigate risk, I think hopefully we'll be out there creating art and being with other people soon. But I think that's kind of where my mind is at. I was like, I'm feeling a little like wistful for the days of going out and touching everything in stores and sniffing candles and seeing shows and friends and not being worried. We've been kind of dealing with our own struggles being stuck inside and having to deal with all of our neighbors because we're basically in an apartment type of situation. And, you know, my dad was going to come visit next week, and now we can't because things have been spiking in Florida. So I think overall, I would highly recommend checking things out in Disney Plus. There's a lot of like really inspiring creativity things there. We also watched Black is King, which is really good. There's a few things on Netflix which I think are pretty bingeable, but it's like overall I was like, I don't think that there's anything that's cropping up as far as like fundraisers and stuff like that. YouTube wise, as far as art, I think we're all kind of holding out that hopefully like the Heroes Act will be passed soon because I could use a little bit of money to stimulate the economy for sure. We're about like halfway done with all of our own home renovations and stuff like that, so that would be really helpful to getting all the final bits of paint up on the wall. But no, we're just kind of hanging out and trying to be inspired, trying to kind of like live our own lives. I think I'm always like one or two moments away from wanting to kind of create my own stuff, but it's still really, really hard, and especially with all of my research kind of getting back up and going and having to deal with that, it's been hard to find balance, I think, in recent weeks, more so than at the beginning.
I have to continually control myself to stop myself from like tying her to a chair and saying, here's the microphone, here's the camera, we're going to start your YouTube channel. Well,
the one thing that we kind of always joke about is I love ASMR. It's kind of like my wind down type of material, and I know some people are into it, some people aren't. It's just really nice and relaxing. I like to sit in the dark and hear whispers. You know, it's like I feel the rest of the world is sometimes very loud. So, you know, to have that kind of like personal attention and focus has been real nice. And I used to do academic advising. So I'm like, if anybody's missing academic advising, I can do an academic advisor ASMR.
This is the $1 million idea I've been trying to get her to do, just being broadcast out there for anybody who catches it. So, you know. But yeah, I think she would do phenomenal with a channel like that, and I keep trying to get her to do it. So
but yeah, no, I think that, you know, looking back on half the year being kind of spent inside and being kind of at this like under siege, it's been a little exhausting. So I think I definitely empathize and sympathize with folks who really haven't been able to keep busy because there's this big existential amount of dread around. But also, you know, if keeping busy is kind of the way that you keep sane, like I really admire folks who can get people together and create things. So I was like, I'm not sure that I'm handling everything quite as well, but I do support kind of everybody, no matter if you are a bit more like me and needing to kind of retreat and be keeping yourself safe and sane, or if you're a little bit more like, you know, going out there and making your dream movie and making your dream projects kind of come true, like more like Taylor Swift.
And see, I can remember back when we first started this thing. We sat down with a piece of paper and said, okay, let's come up with our themes. And I was like, well, they're saying that this thing is going to last through April. They're looking at sometime after April is when we'll be doing this. And I was like, maybe we should go into May for our themes? And Brie was like, beginning of July.
Yeah, it's like July 4th.
She was like, at least take it up to July 4th. Because, you know, she's like, I'm not optimistic it's going to be as short as people are saying it is. And I was like, okay, you know what? That's fair. And here we are in August.
Yeah, going into September.
Yep.
And we've been pushed 2 weeks back for my campus. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I was like, I think everybody's going to do the right thing. You know, I think people are really trying their best. I attended a town hall that was talking about why they're deciding to open versus just saying nothing in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, but it is still, it's going to be real hard. I agree with a lot of the physicians I work with where it's like, until we get a vaccine, I think it's just going to be, we're going to be stuck like this, unfortunately. There's just no way to really kind of keep it from spreading. And so I think that kind of my more creative thing, like, you know, I haven't been leaning into the arts as much as I had been, but it's still arts in the sense that it is media being created for my consumption. But I've been leaning a lot into like the scientific education world, because if you are an adult out there, or even if you're a kid out there, if you happen to kind of catch our show, when you're in school, I feel like you do have a lot of resources that kind of help answer your questions about things, or putting you in touch with the right people or places or resources. When you get to be an adult and you have a lot more adult questions about how things kind of work, and, you know, I was really kind of intrigued of how a vaccine would be created, and I completely understand the parts that the proteins in the blood are going to kind of match with the proteins of the vaccine, and I understand that concept, but like I was watching a piece about different types of blood and how different metals that are inside of the blood colors the blood differently, but also protects it from infection better. And I just got really kind of curious about that. Like I started my academic career as a chemist, so I was really intrigued by it. But it's like when you start searching, you know, why does green blood fight off against infection so much better than red blood? There's nothing there in Google to tell you. And you're just like, I don't know a microbiologist. How am I going to talk to somebody and try to educate me? So I feel like PBS and our national public broadcasting system is kind of the best way to have that information kind of accessible and start having people think about those questions even if we never thought about them before. And I understand that's not everybody's cup of tea. Some people think that's very boring, but I have really loved it, and it's really made me feel a lot more confident and secure that like working in clinical research, working for pharmaceutical research is really a good place for me to be right now.
Which now it's not educational programming, but bringing up PBS and educational programming reminds me, Muppets Now is on Disney Plus, and it is lots of fun.
It is.
It is for, I would say for anybody who is a fan of the old Muppet Show, it's got a similar format of, you know, a series of short sketches sort of thing, done more as like, you know, here are our videos we're uploading online. But it is a lot of fun. They're playing the characters really well. And I think from what I've been seeing of the show, they're playing really well with, we've got to produce some of this material in quarantine as well. So,
well, I think my favorite thing that I noticed in the episode we watched today was they have an internal chat between all the Muppets, like a business chat called the Rainbow Connector.
Yes.
And I like that. I thought that was a fun little Easter egg.
Yeah, there are lots of little Easter eggs throughout the show, and that was one she pointed out where I was like, oh, man, I didn't notice that. You get to see the Swedish Chef being the Swedish Chef. Bunsen, Honeydew, and Beaker are back. It's everything you love about the Muppets. And I still have not seen the ABC series that was not really well received. But my feeling is that Muppets Now on Disney Plus is what everybody really wanted ABC to be doing when they said we're going to have a new show with the Muppets. So that is well worth checking out. And apparently, I don't know how much of it is true, how much of it is accurate or anything, but apparently, according to some sources, the show is at least partially improvised, which is an interesting idea as well for the Muppets, of having an improvisational comedy with the Muppets. So, anyway, we've been really enjoying that. There's only 2 episodes so far, so you can catch up real quick. And let's see, I guess we should get into our pitch for today, shouldn't we?
Yes, you know what? I'll be 100% honest. I forgot, like we did on Wednesday, that we've already moved on to something else because I'm like, Law and Order the Musical. Wait, that was last weekend. I think I'm finally, like, I've been inoculized against it a little bit because I've been going into work every other day. But I was like, I think finally the time warp that pandemic is occurring for everybody where you don't remember what day it is.
Yeah,
it's finally getting caught up to me. I don't understand the physics of it, but But yeah, I was totally like, yeah, a lot. Wait, we did that last week.
You know, if there's one thing that's eventually going to reach this transcended man sort of singularity stage of we're all going to be able to live forever, eternally youthful, I imagine it's going to be a whole bunch of scientists being like, well, that's not fair. I spent 2 years in quarantine. Anyway, so let's see. We've been, like Bree said, for a long time now, we've been pitching shows as part of this show. And we follow along with a theme. The theme usually lasts about 4 shows.
Yep, or 2 weeks.
Yeah. And we came off of Fringe Festival shows, was our sort of last theme. And that's where Brie was talking about Law and Order, the musical. That was the last of our Fringe shows, which was like supposed to be shows that limited resources. Maybe when we come back from...
you would see in a 99-seat theater off-Broadway.
Yes, you know, that maybe when we come back out of the situation we're all in now, this will be how theater will rebuild and we'll hit the ground running and sort of thing. And then this past Wednesday, Brie started us off on our new theme, which was plays about social topics, which we felt was a really good transition out of plays that go for fringe festivals, because a lot of social topics theater winds up off-Broadway, off-Broadway, fringe festivals, that sort of thing.
I think everybody's thinking about social topics right now.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like you get to a certain point in your life and you want to see what you can improve about it for yourself. And I think that with a lot of things that are happening out there in the middle of this pandemic, whether it's health or race or politics or economics, I think a lot of us are not only thinking about what do we want to do to improve our own lives, but maybe like we should improve like a lot of bigger things.
Yeah.
And I think that that's how we kind of fell on social topics, is that I really believe, and this is my belief about musical theater, is I really believe that musical theater can inspire and educate. I think that, you know, when you go back to looking at a lot of Rodgers and Hammerstein, you look at really training people to think empathetically towards each other. And I really think that that's what musical theater is there for. I think it's allowing people to be educated in a more entertaining way. And that's why I think the topic of social topics and, you know, social issues, even though not everything is an issue, but this is really why I think that it fits in well. Yeah.
And see, we started off with, you had a few ideas for how we can bring the topic of single parenthood into musical theater. And today I get to continue this with, for some reason, I selected the topic of toxic masculinity. All right, so really quickly, I usually get into this thing where I get bogged down in explaining what a thing is before I get into talking about what I want to do with it in a show. So I'm going to try not to do that this time. For one thing, toxic masculinity is a topic that there are many, many great books and podcasts and documentaries
and theatrical archetypes
that you can dive into in order to better understand what toxic masculinity is. But I am going to discuss what it is and what it is not just a little bit, because right now, as a topic, there are people who are derailing the conversation. And those people see the problem of toxic masculinity, the issue of toxic masculinity, as, oh, well, you're just saying that because someone is masculine, they're evil. And that is not what it is about. It's the same sort of misunderstanding that's been going on for as long as there's been a feminist movement. Feminism, where people would accuse feminists of saying, oh, you just want to say men are evil, take power away from men, give it all to women, when that is not what feminism is about. And the two are the issue of feminism and of toxic masculinity, they're very, very intertwined. Like, they're not exactly the same topic, but they have a lot of DNA between the two of them.
And even gender issues as well.
Yes.
Like, I would say, like, there's a lot of things that kind of crop up with our whole gender conversation going on in this country really for about the past 50 years that have really kind of tread that line.
So here's my understanding in a nutshell of what toxic masculinity, what that discussion entails. And what it entails is that traditional concepts of masculinity and the way those have been ingrained into our culture are structured in such a way that they ultimately wind up being harmful to everyone. Not just, oh, toxic masculinity makes life more difficult for women. Toxic masculinity makes life more difficult and less enjoyable for men. It makes life more difficult and less enjoyable for everyone, regardless of who they are or how they identify. So it is not saying men are a source of evil. It's saying the way we have made a series of conceptualizations of what is a man, that is what is causing the trouble.
Yes, and things that are inaccessible as well. Like I would say, like kind of two examples that spring to mind are things like men cannot have other close male friends.
Right.
Like that's something that is just inarguably not true. Also, if you look at bossiness, like a woman can't be bossy, that's negative, but a man has to be bossy because that's positive.
Yes, that's leadership in a man. So, not to get too overtly political with our current political situation in this country, but toxic masculinity is why there's zero fallout for Donald Trump spending an entire presidential debate acting like the dangerous drunk guy at the bar that you have to warn everybody about, while Hillary Clinton gets raked over the coals for at one point saying to him, but that's just not true. She has one answer that's a little bit stern with him. That's a huge problem for her. He literally lingers right behind her shoulder, glaring at her like he wants to strangle her, and somehow that just shows his, leadership skills. Yeah, that's toxic masculinity right there on the stage. Toxic masculinity is wrapped up in a lot of other social topics that we can discuss, like misogyny is a big part of toxic masculinity, because when you think about it, you think of one of the big insults for a young boy from their peer group usually tends to be, you whatever like a girl. Well, what's wrong with girls? Nothing is wrong with girls, but it gets wrapped up in the misogyny. It wraps the toxic masculinity of you are acting unmasculine, generates misogyny in the form of you are a woman and therefore you are wrong. It gets wrapped up in homophobia, in transphobia, things like that, because these things are seen as assaults on traditional masculinity, and therefore they are seen as being inherently bad, and toxic masculinity being wrapped up as well in an issue of violence being a part of the traditional masculine image, creates then violent responses to all of these things that you see as an attack. A lot has been done about the manosphere, which is, for those of you who aren't familiar with the manosphere as a concept, that's basically all of the alt-right men's groups that have formed online, and they do a lot of reaching out and recruiting to younger people, which starts off with, hey, men used to be able to do da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then drags them gradually farther and farther into a really sort of twisted, regressive thing. So that is toxic masculinity. And two things I find fascinating about my experience with toxic masculinity, which every man has experience with toxic masculinity. If you don't realize what your experience with toxic masculinity is, if you think you don't have it, it's a little bit like systemic racism. It's so ingrained in our society. It's somewhere, you just haven't examined it yet. But the two things that I find sort of fascinating are toxic masculinity tends to be performative.
Mm-hmm.
It is not concerned with the genuine content of a person so much as how well they perform masculinity. So the big example I can think of this is that John Wayne, icon of masculinity. A lot of the people who oppose attempts to talk about toxic masculinity hold up John Wayne as their example of this is what a man used to be. Why can't they be more like that? John Wayne played tennis and danced and listened to classical music and never served in the military. Went to an arts high school as a teenager. John Wayne, the actual person, was very much the opposite of what people who preach traditional masculinity think of as being masculine. But because his public persona was so well performed as, I'm a real man, I'm here to eat steak and drink beer, and I am here to tell all of you young folks, go out there and join the Marines, and stand up and salute the flag. As long as he was performing that well, nobody cared about who he genuinely was, as long as he kept up that facade of what you expect a man to be. And the other thing that I think is fascinating about toxic masculinity, in my experience, is that it is, and I may be using completely the wrong term here, it is recursive. It doesn't just repeat, it repeats and contracts. The structure of toxic masculinity is the same structure essentially as a Nautilus shell. What starts off as manly, the edges of it eventually become less and less manly until they're completely blocked out. Like I said, John Wayne danced. Humphrey Bogart played squash. James Bond likes to get tailored suits and drinks cocktails so fancy that he has to explain to experienced bartenders how to make them properly. These are all things that now are seen as behaviors that are unmanly. And toxic masculinity says any man who cares about how he looks, there's something girly about that. There's something not heterosexual about that. But that's 90% of James Bond's character.
Well, I think you'll always see it in social media platforms where it's something like, wait, you use an umbrella? Men don't need umbrellas. And you're like...
That is a real example. Someone went to social media to say, every time I see a man standing in the rain holding an umbrella, I want to smack it out of his hands because it's not manly to hold an umbrella. If you're not standing there holding your umbrella for your girlfriend, that's the only reason you're allowed to hold an umbrella as a man. If you're just trying to keep yourself dry, no, that's not manly. And I'm like, fellas, is it gay to not want to die of pneumonia?
Or just like, men can't eat dessert.
Yeah.
If you like cake, that's girly.
Or apparently ordering dessert at a restaurant is now something that is considered suspicious for a man to do. And it gets ridiculous like that.
Mm-hmm.
No, it eventually comes down to, if you're not crouched down in a duck blind with camouflage makeup smeared on your face and a red MAGA hat, then you're not really a man, are you? No, if you spend any moment of your life not like that. So men are not supposed to care about how they look, not care about how they smell, not care about learning any skills other than man skills.
Yeah. And I think like the other problem is we talked two examples that we found online, is it's very, very easy to troll online.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very hard to know who is saying something in satirical jest to, this really hyperbolic place,
Yeah.
and somebody's taking it seriously. Because I think the same thing that people were worried about when we were little, oh, kids learn everything from movies, kids learn everything from TV. If you don't teach kids, they're going to pick it up on their own and interpret something that's fictional as real is what we're supposed to do. And I think that's the major concern right now is it's harder and harder for even us as people who grew up on the internet to tell what is a deep fake and what is real information and what is something somebody's really trying to say about the culture to what is somebody's mocking about the culture.
Yeah.
Which, if we have a hard time doing that, people who are 12, 13, 11, are they going to say, oh, I can't order dessert and I can't hold an umbrella? Right. Are they going to say, well, that's ridiculous? And so I think that that's why this is a real concern. It's just as our parents were concerned about us watching the wrong type of movies or playing the wrong type of video games, how are we able to kind of raise children in a good culture where they can interpret that's ridiculous and I can think critically about it? Or are they really going to be impacted by something like that?
Well, and a part of it, and we've discussed this as well, I have said, whenever people, before the last election, whenever people were like, oh, you're a comedian, you get up and you tell jokes, and I bet you're really looking forward to a Trump presidency because it's going to be so much material for you. And I was like, no, I absolutely, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but at that point, he had already spent the better part of 20 years trying to ruin one man's life for making fun of the size of his hands. It's like, no, I'm not looking forward to him being the president. And even with that said, I have said since then, okay, he got elected. I did not expect his election to genuinely kill the very concept of comedy. Because it doesn't matter how satirical and extreme you get, it can never match the reality. He says things on the regular that were headlines on The Onion 6 years ago. And I feel like toxic masculinity falls into that category as well. It's very difficult to tell, like Bree just said, the satirical and the fake and everything and the snarky from the real. Because when you get into the manosphere, the rhetoric of the manosphere is as ridiculous as any attempt to satirize the way people look at masculinity.
Yeah, I think that there's a account. I was about to say channel, but I was like, there's not channels on Twitter. There's an account on Twitter that I see pop up time and time again, which is called Accidentally Left Wing.
Yeah.
Where it's like somebody says like, oh, this is the future liberals want, and everyone's like, yes.
Yes. I think my favorite one that popped up recently on Accidentally Left Wing was, it was like, here's why I oppose socialism. It's like, here's a picture of a thriving port city and everything, and it says U.S., and then here's a picture of like a rundown building with the wall collapsing and everything, and it's like USSR, and the person commenting first underneath it says, except the first picture is actually Cuba and the second picture is actually Detroit. And the first person is like, wait, it is? I'm like, yeah. But
or I like the one where it's like, well, if Bernie Sanders is such a socialist, on his birthday he should give away 90% of his cake. And somebody was like, that's how birthday cakes work.
Yes. It's like, is that not how birthday?
Yes, do you not have any friends?
Are you inviting all of your friends over to watch you eat an entire cake all by yourself?
Yes, because that's very manly, unless you ordered it and then it wasn't manly.
Someone had to present it to you.
And then you had to show your masculine prowess by eating the whole cake in front of your friends.
Yes. Blow out all the candles and eat the whole cake.
No, eat it with the candles fully lit!
And don't make any wishes. Because dudes don't make wishes, all right? They make stuff happen. All right? So, yeah.
Oh.
All right, so
this is why it's a very important topic that we need to deal with in the form of musical theater.
Yeah, but see, you get into that sort of shrinking spiral of masculinity, one thing that happens is things become absolutely ridiculous. And another thing that happens is people who are still considered icons of masculinity are now so far outside of what is genuinely considered typically like appropriate masculinity. And So it is constantly chasing an ideal. It's the ideal of masculinity under toxic masculinity continually shrinks to become an impossible target to hit. And I feel like I don't know if I should actually mention the title of like a manosphere thing because it might draw negative attention, but I'm just gonna because I feel like it's a great example of how ridiculous it all gets. Is that one of the foundational websites for this weird idea of let's rebuild men to be real men? One of the foundational websites is literally entitled "We Hunted the Mammoth." It's like, we did? I did not receive the memo. When did this happen? Like, I am way behind on my mammoth hunting. I have not fulfilled my quota at all. But, so, and here's the thing that got to me as I was trying to come up with my pitch for today. Is that I started off with, well, the way to go with this is let's put an exterior voice on stage of masculinity. And then we can have our main character has this external voice of masculinity that follows him around and is constantly telling him, here's what you've got to do to be a real man. So that ultimately he can realize sort of the toxicity of the voice coming at him. And be like, no, I've got to rebel against that. And because, like I mentioned a lot about him, I was like, the real archetype pull up there would be John Wayne. That this is a guy who has, like, the ghost of John Wayne constantly following him around. And at some point he's got to turn around and be like, hey, wait a minute. Like, you're not even the real John Wayne. No, you're just some image I put together out of movies and stuff like that. But then it occurred to me, I'm like, oh, you know who has done this really well? Be More Chill.
Mm-hmm.
Which coded it more as cool than masculine.
Yeah.
But it is still toxic masculinity constantly being thrown at this character by an avatar of cool, in that case, Keanu Reeves. Mm-hmm. But it is, I was like, I am heading, at this moment, my pitch for this show is basically, what if we did Be More Chill, but with an older actor?
Well, you know what I think is so funny, especially after just watching the Howard Ashman thing, is they talked about it in the documentary of how Beauty and the Beast might have been a gay allegory or a AIDS allegory, but I really think like what's probably closer to it was a masculine allegory. Yeah. Gaston versus the Beast. The Beast is fancy. Yeah. The Beast has like servants and doesn't do anything for himself and has like a big old like mansion that he wears fancy clothes. And Gaston kills everything and is, I'm gonna get the girl.
you know what? That is a perfectly fair read on it. And the idea that in order to be himself once again, the Beast has to shed this beastliness that has been placed on top of everything about him. Whereas Gaston has embraced it fully to the point that
I'm going to go kill another person.
Yes. You know, if you remove it from him, you effectively remove it from Gaston by killing Gaston. Mm-hmm. You know, he has to be thrown off of a roof. He has to fall off of a roof and die because that's how much he believes in he's going to perform this masculinity.
But then once the toxic masculinity is gone from the town, it turns pretty nice.
Yeah.
I mean, also everybody turns back into humans from, like, silverware, but...
Yes. We hope that Chip is all right, even though as a teacup he had that little tiny crack right there. You know, that... Maybe have him see a doctor right after he turns back. Just saying. But yeah, I think that that's a completely valid read on that version of Beauty and the Beast. Is... that it's all about the performance of masculinity getting in the way of genuine, like, equality and happiness. And yeah. So I feel like my idea is you've got to have... your main character has to be someone who is pursuing masculinity. And pursuing the idea of this is what a real man is. And I wanted to get away then from, like I said, the ghostly voice following him around. Because, like I said, Be More Chill did it. And Be More Chill, it's not just that they did it. Lots of ideas get reused. Mm-hmm. It's part of art, is that ideas get reused. It's that they did it so well.
Well, also, I would say another musical that I think of immediately of working against toxic masculinity to some extent is Hamilton.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole major component of, Dear Theodosia.
Yeah.
And I think that that's always a thing that we think of as when you describe things of caring for a child.
Yeah.
How many of those traits are in that toxic masculinity character? Probably not a whole heck of a lot. Right. It's very nurturing. And so to have two male rivals on stage sing about caring and loving and supporting their children. Now, of course, this isn't like their whole focus or anything like that, but I think that that is a large blow to toxic masculinity. Not only, saying, yes, I need to support my family and this child, but I want to care for them. I want to teach them. I want to, watch them grow up. And I think that that's kind of a major transformative experience in that musical.
So what I figure is we have a character who has sort of a traditional teenage boy coming of age story. And we're going to follow him. And I said, okay, so instead of giving him an avatar who follows him around, that is his concept of masculinity, let's give him an endless source of avatars. So essentially what you have is the voice that's following him around is his phone. Because your phone is your connection to social media, what other people think. It's your connection to the world at large and the culture at large. And part of the problem of toxic masculinity is there is so much more media out there that shores up toxic masculinity than that addresses it as an issue that needs to be resolved. And I'm not saying that as, people haven't been responsible or anything. Is that it's socially ingrained. And it has been for a very, very long time. So I grew up watching Dean Martin movies. Dean Martin movies are fantastic. I love them. I still love them. Dean Martin has a lot in his movies that's very toxically masculine. Mm-hmm. The whole, don't take no for an answer, just keep harping on her until she realizes what a great guy you are. That's classic toxic masculinity right there. So you could have this character fueled by pop culture throughout the ages. Mm-hmm. So you have the moment that John Wayne steps in to be like, no real man would take that kind of talk from anyone. Or you can have Dean Martin stepping in to be like, well, no just means try again tomorrow, So
the carousel of horrible progress.
Yes. So, and those are all classic things that I grew up with, but you can also look at the music of boy bands. Justin Timberlake's music. Nothing against Justin Timberlake as a performer, but go back and watch his first solo music video. It's pretty stalkerific and terrifying. And again, nothing against him personally or as a performer. It's ingrained in our society. So that ideas like that become very normal for people to talk about, even though, as I said, they're stalkerific and terrifying.
Well, yeah, I think you brought up a really good point about things being ingrained in society, because I think that even, in nuclear family type of situations, right?
Yeah.
It's you can say, I'm going to let my son play with dolls and dress as princesses and do whatever he wants. But there's still a larger society at whole that will say, you can't have long hair, or you can't do that, or you can't do that. So there's not really this reaffirming message, even if your parents are perfectly fine at expressing equality and letting you enjoy the things that you enjoy and encouraging you to be empathetic and kind and caring.
Yeah, unfortunately, parents alone do not raise a child. Mm-hmm. The child eventually goes out into the culture and encounters other people who have these ideas ingrained into them as well. So as open as the parents might be, the child will go to school, and then their friends will be there running around yelling about, you can't like that, only girls like that sort of thing. And toxic masculinity is not just a thing that is a problem For men, there are a lot of women who buy into toxic masculinity as well. They expect men to behave in a certain way. And that then leads into a sort of like toxic femininity of no, men are supposed to be this way, women are supposed to be this way, and it's always heteronormative, traditional gender roles. So the whole thing...
Yeah, it kind of like bleeds into that, like, I'm not like other girls.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
that type of attitude where it's like, if I just change myself into what men like,
yeah,
then it'll go fine.
So, fascinating thing that I saw recently, everybody always talks about John Hughes, The Breakfast Club. And was it Winona Ryder's character in that? Who does the makeover?
Ali Sheedy.
Ali Sheedy's character who does the makeover.
Mm-hmm.
And goes from being like a punk rock sort of person
Yeah,
to
the
being,
basket case.
Yeah.
I got to watch it in French class, which
Yeah.
was like one of like the best experiences I had in high school, was watching The Breakfast Club in French.
See, we
Le
got
basket case.
we got to watch Demolition Man in Spanish. So, but someone made the point recently of like, for years, people's reaction to the movie has been after she does her makeover, like, oh, but she looked so much better before the makeover. And someone said, well, yeah, that's the reaction John Hughes wanted you to have. John Hughes wanted you to look at her and be like, she looked so much better before she let everyone change her into what they wanted her to be. And it's like, the fact that she is okay with it was sort of like, it was John Hughes being like, hey, some kids walk very happily into society pressing them into the roles that they want them to have. And so I think that it is... I want to take that sort of... I don't want to say John Hughes movies, but let's go to the things that allowed John Hughes to say, I'm going to make serious movies about teenagers doing crazy things. And let's go to the 70s and 80s teen-sploitation comedies. Things like Screwballs, things like Porky's, things that are all about boys being wild boys. And let's put our character in a friend group that's like that. And constantly he's listening to these voices that drift in and out from his phone. The voices all get musical numbers. So you could almost see this as a string of beauty school dropout numbers. With John Wayne coming in to sing a song about what it's like to be a man. And the whole thing's delivered in a John Wayne voice. With John Wayne being like, men don't sing, Or you have Dean Martin coming in to, guide him through how you're supposed to respond to a girl, and
Yeah, I feel like you have a really good plan of attack.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be like, John Wayne shows up when it's like, man, I don't want to fight you in the hall. A man never says, partner, that he won't stand up to another man.
Right, yeah.
And then like you said, like, no, I don't think I really want to go to prom with you. Oh, Dean Martin comes out, oh no, like, you should never take no for an answer. Just ask her tomorrow,
Yes.
I feel like you could kind of have like the horrible Spice Girls of toxic masculinity.
Yes.
Like, here's Sporty, and here's Baby, and here's Horny, and here's Fighty. I really like when I get him to crack up, because it means I'm the better comedian.
I'm sorry, I'm just now picturing John Wayne as Scary Spice.
And that's the musical pitch. John Wayne is Scary Spice. Give us $1 million.
Yes. But yeah, I think that, having to come to the realization of, hey, every time I follow what you guys tell me to do against my better judgment, a lot of bad stuff happens. And having to come to the realization of, what is, asking the question of what is a man? And coming to the question of, do you think you're a man? Do you feel like a man? You're a man. Who's going to tell you that you're not a man if you personally feel like a man?
If you live your life and take care of your stuff.
Yeah, so go do what you enjoy doing, be decent to other people, and don't let this image of manliness drive you down a path that's going to be destructive. Which is a message that, of course, these 70s and 80s teensploitation comedies never end with. They always end with, and horny teenage boys prevail.
Yes, so, it's like, well, even like the nerdy movies, right?
Yeah.
It's like they still have to conform to that same masculinity that jocks do, and that's where I think a lot of people say, this is why, to be honest, like Mark Zuckerberg was such an issue with like Facebook, is it's not like, oh, we're going to create this new world order where, nerdy and brainy reigns supreme. It's basically, it's like, no, we have as much right to live a jock lifestyle as the jocks do.
Yes.
And so it's kind of everybody conforming to this like really horrible mentality.
Yeah, because it is continually a lot. When you've got patriarchy and you've got toxic masculinity together, what you've got is you have to get the power in order to be the jerk that a man is supposed to be. And if you're not the jock, you're the nerdy guy, well, you don't have the power to be the jerk that a man is supposed to be. But once you've started a $1 billion company,
then you can.
Yes, then you can. Then you can be the jerk you were always destined to be.
It's like I'm still pervading on the idea of I'm rapey Spice and I'm fighty Spice. Like I really like the horsemen of the apocalypse as it relates to toxic masculinity, I guess.
Oh, can we do the four horsemen of the apocalypse as the Spice Girls as a musical?
I'd watch it. You know what I saw that somebody said? They're like, I really hope that more bands that are kind of coming up now do their version of Spice World. Like, people are really recognizing how great Spice World was, and they're like, there just needs to be more of that in the world. Just having fun, being nice.
And if you're out there and you haven't seen Spice World, I understand the Spice Girls may not be your cup of tea musically, but if you like
the Beatles, you really have to watch the Spice World.
The movie is not nearly as bad as it has been roasted for being over the years. It is genuinely a fun movie. And it's pretty much, it's the same movie that the Beatles made constantly through their film careers.
Or the Monkees. Like, and it is one of these things where it really just is like a fun romp of 1990s, like, British culture.
If you enjoy the Beatles' Help is basically Spice World. Or more accurately, Spice World is basically Help. But,
But we're going to keep kind of pushing that, because that's toxic masculinity, is getting you to watch Spice World.
Yes. Watch Spice World. Watch the Josie and the Pussycats movie. Have not seen the new CW series. Can't really speak to that. The characters were fun when they appeared in Riverdale. But, yeah, it is... I feel like that's the image you've got to go toward, is you've got to have the... you don't even have to go back to the 70s and 80s to find it. American Pie was the same basic style of movie. Yeah. So in the late 90s, as I was heading off to college, that was still the coming of age story for boys. Was how are we going to get to see these women naked without them realizing we're seeing them naked, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think, like, we even talk about, like, the reason why I think we gravitated towards watching, like, a lot of the Try Guys stuff is they were very much like, hey, we'll try anything. And they weren't necessarily hung up on being close male friends for each other. They weren't hung up on what it meant to be a dad. They weren't hung up on, well, if women's pants fits better, I guess I'm going to wear women's pants. Like, they're really trying to, I think, fight against a lot of toxic masculinity in their way that they can, while being comedians and being ridiculous online. But I mean, I think that's something that an 11-year-old or 12-year-old could see and be like, oh, well, yeah, it's really nice that they're all kind of cool dudes and they made a lot of money doing this, and
so they'll
enjoy each other's company.
They'll have fun with, like, oh, we're doing a beauty makeup today, but they actually really try to do a decent beauty makeup.
And mention how hard it is.
Or Ned Fulmer, one of the Try Guys, went back and watched one of his old videos where... He had all of these style hang-ups that he was like, well, I would never wear clothes like that. And he worked with a stylist to, for 1 week, wear only outfits that challenged his ideas of what was all right to wear. And did he crack up a lot during it? Did he make some jokes about what he was wearing and stuff like that? Yeah, he did, but he wore it all. And he didn't act like it was a terrible thing to be seen in public wearing these clothes. So, yeah. So that's my pitch. That's a little bit of discussion about toxic masculinity. What do you guys think? There's some of you in the chat room. You can talk. You can tweet at us. These places down here. You can comment on YouTube when this goes up on our archives. Our archives are a little bit behind our current time. I am logging on right after we finish our stream today and getting our backlog uploaded. Sorry for the wait on that, those of you who watch us on YouTube. But we've got, I think we've had a good show today.
Yeah.
If I do say so myself.
Good weekend.
Because
I
it
hope
was
that
my
your
top.
weekend is going well.
Yes. Hope your weekend is going well. There's lots of great stuff out there to see.
And let us know if there has been something that you've watched. I feel like we do get kind of one-sided. You know, we are the talking heads, as it were. But you know, if you want to go ahead and tweet at us in the upcoming week, or if you want to go ahead and comment on our videos, we'd love to know what you're watching. We'd love to kind of share in that. We'd love it to be a bit more of a conversation. And if there is topics that you'd like to see us cover, now granted, I think we have something scheduled all the way up until October. But, you know, if we are stuck inside until December, we are always looking for new topics. We'd love to hear your ideas.
Yeah. So, and she just mentioned, thank you. She just mentioned we are the Talking Heads, and I'm like, ooh, Talking Heads, True Stories. Great movie. You should go check it out. But anyway, let's see now. We're continuing our social topics next week. And on Wednesday, what's the topic you're doing on Wednesday?
I never remember. It's always a surprise. I was like, I just feel like I'm sure a lot of you who are going back to work feel the same. But I feel like now that I'm going back to work for 40 hours a week, I'm just like, yeah, it's like the weekends, it just all goes out. I'll worry about what I'm doing next Wednesday on Monday.
Yes. So be back here on Wednesday, and we will be continuing our ideas. Until that time, if you are lucky enough that COVID has not hit you or anyone you know, keep it that way. Stay home. Practice your social distancing. Wear your mask. Do everything you can to stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves, because we're not there to take care of you.
And just because the hospitals have room doesn't mean we want you there.
Yes. All right. And we will see you again on Wednesday. Bye.